Okay, we're continuing with the Holy Grail of Wisdom quotes by M.P. Rogers, alphabetical order. We're doing Stephen Meyer, PhD, born in 1958. He's very good, biologist, engineer, and he specializes in studying, the origin of life and, intelligent design or creationism. And I can tell you, I was an A+ student in biology, evolutionary biology at Stanford. I've been keeping track of it ever since then for over, about 40 years, and I can tell you, I believe in intelligent design. Darwinism is bogus. It's just you've been brainwashed into believing it because of public schools, but it cannot explain the big events. It cannot explain macroevolution or origin of life. It's good only for microevolution. Anyways, here's what Stephen Meyer has to say. Thomas Huxley was one of the most famous biologists of the 1800s, but he knew almost nothing about the basic biology of a cell. We now know that a cell is a chemical factory based on genetic code. Okay, and what it comes down to, like Stephen Meyer had said, is where does all this information come from? And it's like John Lennox said, if you go to the beach and you see your name written on the sand by the water, by the shore, you know an intelligent person wrote your name. They had to be literate. They had to have the intention to write your name. It's just not going to happen by accident. The ocean never writes your name in the sand. It just doesn't happen. So how is it that the human genome, which is 3.3 billion base pairs of complex biochemistry, genetic code of letters, how does it write itself? 3.3 billion base pairs. That's nonsense. Lightning bolt hits a little bit of water and then it writes itself to make a perfect human being? Okay, no way. Sophisticated objects that are highly functional, they're designed. They don't happen by accident. Okay. Stephen Meyer, for enzyme function, the metaphor of a hand in a glove is more accurate than that of a lock and a key. DNA genetic code, like the English language text, is like English language text or like computer software code. The big mystery in DNA science is, where does the information come from? Where do you get the information to make the immune system, to make the human brain, to make the blood clotting system? Okay? There's no explanation for it. Random chance cannot explain the origin of life. If you randomly pick letters out of a bag, you get gibberish. The DNA code is not gibberish. The DNA code is intelligently designed. It's like the old story. If you took 1,000 chimps and you put them in a room full of typewriters, Darwinism would say eventually they would type Shakespeare. The reality is they just poop on the typewriters. They don't produce anything. Okay? That's how it is. All right? Okay, here's a quote by Michael Polanyi. As the arrangement of a printed page is extraneous to the chemistry of the printed page, so is the base sequence in a DNA molecule extraneous to the chemical forces at work in a DNA molecule. Okay, the creation of new information is habitually associated with conscious activity. All right, well, those are sort of background quotes, not that helpful. I could get rid of those. Okay, when evaluating multiple competing hypotheses, we make inferences to determine which is most likely correct. The DNA genetic code is highly complex with very specific information. Highly complex and very specific information are more likely to arise by intelligent design than from random chance. The DNA genetic code has similarities to computer software like hierarchical filing systems and spell checker error correction systems. Junk DNA was previously the label on sections of DNA that did not code for proteins. It turns out that much of this so-called junk DNA is actually part of the computer's operating system. It's regulatory DNA. Intelligent design is a logical conclusion from the study of biology. The people who get it first are the engineers, software designers, and medical doctors. Yeah, because I know how complicated it is. Think about it. If you get the smartest people on the planet, the highest IQs, and all they want to do is science, and they devote themselves their entire adult life to trying to discover something, they'll usually discover one or two things. That's about it. So that's like, 1/100th of 1% of biology, scientific knowledge. If the smartest human doing their absolute best with all the money and all the equipment for 50, 60 years can only come up with a little drop in the ocean, how could the whole thing design itself? It's insane. Okay? All right. Randomness and design are the opposites in the continuum. The information in an English sentence or computer software does not derive from the chemistry of the ink or the physics of magnetism, but from a source extrinsic to them, from design. The message transcends the medium. Okay. Darwinism cannot explain the Cambrian expansion. You know, what is that, about 600 million years ago? All these new phyla, species just came out of nowhere. There are no transitional forms to explain them, okay? You don't have transitional forms to explain where humans came from, okay? No one can explain the origin of the universe or of life or of animal speciation. That's just a fact, Stephen Meyer. Okay, his books are good. They're more complex than Metaxas. Eric Metaxas comes back out of like a humanities literature background, okay? And he's a very bright guy, and he did a fantastic job with his book, Is Atheism Dead? Versus the Stephen Meyer books are more complex. They're at a more sophisticated scientific level. But they're both good. They're good. I enjoy both of their stuff. They got plenty of YouTube videos that are good.